Hello, and welcome to Nonprofit Enthusiast Live, the weekly sessions where we talk about all things nonprofit. Whether you're a seasoned nonprofit professional or just getting started in the industry, these lives are for you. Our mission is to provide engaging and informative conversations with experts in the nonprofit world, sharing insights, strategies, and stories that can help you make a difference in your community and beyond. Each episode is centered around a theme for the month. The topics include anything from fundraising and marketing to volunteer management and board development. We'll explore the challenges facing nonprofits today and share practical tips and advice for overcoming them. But Nonprofit Enthusiast Live isn't just about learning. We also want to create a community of like-minded individuals who are passionate about making a positive impact. We want to hear from you and engage in conversations that inspire and motivate us all to do more. So, whether you're tuning in during your morning commute, while doing chores around the house, or on a break from your busy workday, we hope you'll find something valuable in each episode of Nonprofit Enthusiast Live. All right, so let's go ahead and get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Nonprofit Enthusiast Live. I'm your host, Lashina Williams, and so excited to be back with you all today and to talk about our topic, leading through uncertainty. I'm sorry, I can't speak today. Strategic volunteers and community engagement in 2026. And who better to have on and have this conversation with than Dana Litwin, who has joined us in the past. So if you missed any of those past sessions, make sure that you check those out on our page. So I'm so excited to have Dana back with us as we dive into this month's topic. Hi, Dana. How are you?
Hey, Lashina. Hey, girl. Hey. Welcome to 2026.
Yes, welcome to 2026. We are here.
We're here, whether we like it or not. We're here, but I like being with you, so it's all good.
Yes, a good time. I'm so glad that you're back on. And especially for this particular topic around volunteer and community engagement. But before we get started, if you don't mind, for those who haven't got to know you yet, just talking a little bit about how you entered the nonprofit arena, a little bit about how you got into volunteerism, and then we'll kind of go from there.
Sounds good. Yeah, I'm Dana, and I was a volunteer coordinator as an entry level in 2002 with Project Open Hand here in San Francisco, where I'm streaming right now. And over those first few years, I really just realized that was going to be the career for me. I had a background in acting and music and things like that. And sometimes as people who do know me and have seen me live at conferences, sometimes I incorporate musical or stagecraft elements into my presentations about volunteer engagement. But for the last several years, I've been full-time consulting on strategic volunteer engagement. I love being on your show and podcast. I also have my own YouTube channel, Dana's Priceless Advice, with and for leaders of volunteers. So I have several guests on that channel as well. And I'm sure we'll put all the links when this goes up. But yeah, so this is my speciality, as they say in the old movies. And I'm happy to discuss, especially in 2026, the many challenges that are facing the nonprofit sector and especially volunteer engagement right now. So I'm really glad you made time and space for this conversation today, Lashina.
Yes, thank you. So let's kickstart the conversation around leading through uncertainty.
Mm-hmm.
So during challenging times, what mistakes do nonprofits commonly make with volunteer engagement?
Well, we saw this. We saw really egregious examples of this when COVID hit in early 2020, and we're seeing some of it in the last couple of years of here in the States, at least. Political instability with federal actions and unconstitutional things happening, and just a lot of disruption in the country, but also directly affecting communities that nonprofits typically work with and serve. And the biggest mistake that nonprofits can make is having a knee-jerk reaction to stop or pause volunteer programs or to You're going to hear this phrase a lot, comply in advance with unclear new regulations or things that are declared but aren't officially laws yet. So we've seen a lot of that instability in 2025 and continuing into 2026. And I've actually worked with a lot of clients in the last year or so going through these exact problems where I'm like, no, 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 don't comply in advance. Let's wait until we know what's really a new law or new regulation and not just knee-jerk react to fold or comply or, go along to get along or try to keep your head down, because we know historically in times like these that actually is the opposite of a good move to make. That's not a good long-term strategic goal. You want to maintain trust with your volunteers, with your staff, with your board, and especially with the rest of the community that your nonprofit's working with. Whatever the cause, whatever the mission, you want to continue to build trust and not do anything that's like a short-term panic move that breaks that trust. And I spent a lot of the last 5-6 years restoring trust and rebuilding volunteer programs for nonprofits that had that shutdown, knee-jerk, go dark, go quiet reaction in early 2021 through 2022.
I love that. I love that advice. Because yes, sometimes everyone can get up into a panic and just start doing things that does impact our volunteer programs. But I love like the suggestion as to like don't react too quickly. um, Especially when it comes to building volunteers trust. So let's talk a little bit about how can, speaking of trust, how can profit leaders maintain trust and engagement with volunteers when resources are tight and the pressure is high?
I always fall back to my 3 C's of happy volunteers or just really a happy team, because this applies to paid employees as well, which is you're always thinking about and centering, and this works for clients or constituents in the community, but what is the level of comfort and convenience and connection? So those are kind of the 3 C's, and it can be as simple as a Post-it note on the side of your laptop or desktop computer. It says, comfort, convenience, connection. Then it can get as strategic and into your strategic plan and as complicated as you want to make it, so that that becomes not just an in the moment, can I smile and say thank you to a volunteer? Can we communicate with, clarity and openness and honesty? And, especially right now, saying, hey, how are you all feeling and thinking about what's going on? We want to have these conversations with the community, with our volunteers, with our staff and board. And usually those open, honest conversations are the ones that lead to better long-term trust, continuing to work with the community, co-create with them, not tell them what to do or say, well, we're shutting down our services because times are tough. If you really reach deep into those community roots and the trust that's already been established, you're probably going to get fresh ideas, new solutions on what to do if there is a feeling of, we don't know if we're getting that federal AmeriCorps grant anymore, which is a direct thing from a client I just worked with. Like, what's going on? We're trying to do an AmeriCorps grant all year. What is happening with AmeriCorps?
Yeah.
Changed every month, you
Yep.
know? And still we were able to come up with a strategy that will help them succeed, whether they incorporate AmeriCorps members or not. But it's really taking that community approach, that honest, open approach, and say, hey, we're scared too, but we have each other and we have each other's backs. It takes so long, and I'm sure you can attest to this too with your own nonprofit and your own work. It takes a long time to build up trust, and it is broken in a second. Trust can be very, very brittle, especially when everyone is stressed and there's this feeling of chaos or uncertainty. And how you get through that chaos is really connecting with each other. The comfort and the convenience part of the 3 C's have to do with, is someone physically and emotionally comfortable? So that has to do with welcoming and belonging. If you say we welcome everyone, is that really true? Are some everyone's automatically treated better than other everyone's that you're welcoming? And the other side of that in the times that we're in is, if you say we welcome everyone, but a bunch of wolves come into the middle of the sheep and goat party and say, well, you said you welcomed everyone, but we're here to, kill all your goats and sheep. Like that doesn't work. That doesn't work either. So making sure that the comfort convenience connection is creating that deep connection, you're all in this together, that sense of we're one team, whether we're staff, volunteers, community members, we're all working for the same cause, whatever that is, across the spectrum of the nonprofit sector. But it really does come down to, some people, it's okay if some people are uncomfortable and need to go, especially with the threat of state violence and ICE raids. I'm advising a lot of clients, how much can you do remotely? Like, don't expect a bunch of, volunteers who are maybe in these targeted communities or targeted demographics and populations to want to show up to a building en masse where they could just be, grabbed by ICE illegally and unconstitutionally, which is how they're running right now. And really having that sense that we've got each other's backs and we're not going to, sacrifice something or someone just to get ahead with whatever this current administration, which will pass. They all pass in time, sometime or another. That we're here through thick and thin, and we're not just fair weather friends to our communities that are being really impacted by the level of violence and brutality and chaos that is being put on them purposefully to create a sense of societal fear and uncertainty to try to control people more.
I love it. I love that you mentioned kind of exploring some other options, just like
Yeah.
how you said, like for the pandemic, it was like the same
Yeah.
thing, right? Yeah.
There's a lot of ideas out there, and just because you don't think of it doesn't mean it's not a good idea. So having these, listening sessions, again, remotely, if that feels safer for some clients, it feels safer to do their volunteer duties if they can remotely or from home or special projects. We're also seeing a huge jump, especially in targeted areas, and it shifts around. It's right as we're speaking. It's mostly in Minneapolis, St. Paul, but there's still presence in California where I am, and Oregon, and Chicago, and Portland, Maine's getting some attention. But wherever that eye of Sauron focuses its laser beam on, that we're seeing incredible, spontaneous, informal community mutual aid volunteering suddenly pop up. So the other side of that is, if your organization is in any way impacted by these law enforcement actions, but they're really lawless, then get a strategy with community members. And I'm also advising a lot of clients and my colleagues, reach out, connect with mutual aid groups, connect with neighborhood groups, and you can learn something. We in formal structured nonprofit work can often learn something about decentralized, spontaneous, very flexible, very effective strategies and movements, not just around our cause, but also, your nonprofit and your volunteers themselves may say, you know what, actually, I can't do a shift at the animal shelter cuddling puppies as much as I want to, because I have to protect my neighbor Ricardo. Like, I literally have to go into my community and prevent my neighbors from being harmed or taken. And that you may see that shift in volunteers' priorities, just like we saw a shift in priorities throughout, but especially early in COVID, where people I can't afford to get sick. My kids and my parents are sick, especially Gen X. We're in that middle zone, right, where there's kids and parents usually in this age group, and millennials too, where suddenly, if your priorities shift, that's okay. We have to give people grace to do that, and trust that with honest communication, thinking about comfort, convenience, connection as you're recruiting, reaching out for volunteers, that other people will step in and step up to do that work that you need for the specific cause, in addition to all the spontaneous, wonderful work that's happening just from neighborhoods and communities and neighbors helping neighbors.
Thank you. Love that. Love that. So, what does sustainable volunteer engagement look like?
Yeah, I think it looks like having the structures in your nonprofit, having dedicated staff is the first thing that I think a lot of nonprofits miss, or they think that, there's one, or sometimes there's a department of one. Someone is the executive director and the director of development and the volunteer coordinator. If it's a smaller nonprofit and they don't have a lot of staff, then the priority really should be a dedicated professional, ideally with a CVA or a CNP or something that relates directly to the work, that shows that they're an expert in volunteer engagement. That's what makes it sustainable, is continually dedicating that resource and budget item and a decent salary, ideally, to people managing volunteers. And if you have excellent strategic volunteer engagement and a great culture that genuinely welcomes volunteers who are the right fit for the roles and the cause that you're doing, then that automatically creates a resiliency, not just in the work being done by volunteers and staff, but that also many studies have shown that volunteer and donor circles, Venn diagram, are of heavy overlap. So volunteers, a hearty, well-supported, happy volunteer team is also going to help with development, community engagement, communications, messaging. So bring volunteers into not just the role that they're doing, but I love it, and I always advise clients and colleagues, just do like an elevator pitch training for everybody, for every team member, and teach them how to teach other people. 3-minute conversation about what the agency does, what's the mission, what are the priorities, what are you hoping to attain. So there's that kind of capacity, steady capacity and understanding the necessity for a volunteer coordinator to really manage that department really well, and not just be another hat on someone who's got 5 other jobs and they don't really have training and experience in the career of volunteer engagement that people like CVAs or CAVs in healthcare here in the States, or CNPs might have in their background. But it takes that capacity building, and it also takes having systems in place. It doesn't have to be high technology, but having something in place that is genuinely tracking your impact in the community. And that is well beyond the number of hours that volunteers do and the number of volunteers that you have. That is the very, very base foundation. I think I've said that before on the show, but it's always good to remind people and say it louder in the back that, when you're able to collect the right kind of metrics and data on how your volunteers, your programs, your priorities are accomplishing goals, milestones towards the success of your work or your cause, that also becomes really, really attractive to donors and more volunteers and qualified staff members of, oh, this is a really well-run operation. I'm not saying that's easy to do, but I'm saying that's really necessary to, maybe dig in and do the hard work, reshuffle the budget a little bit, and prioritize getting a solid start with volunteer engagement, and then either using volunteer management software or an Excel sheet or a Google Suite or whatever level of technology you've got, or sign-in sheets, but having some sort of way to track the kind of data points and metrics that are going to be important to your agency, and not just to the funders of the moment or the whim of the moment, that are going to help be the foundation for that long-term success.
Love that. Thank you. Thank you. And I'm just thinking about, so what about the organization who let's say they're in the growth phase with their volunteer program, because it's kind of like either you have a full-time volunteer manager or you don't. Like it's kind of where you are. Trying to get to that level of I guess the I know you hit on it a little bit, but kind of getting that level from moving from it's one person who's doing a little bit of everything and managing volunteers, now bringing in a professional, like you mentioned, to be able to manage it. But of course, we know with doing that, when the volunteer manager is a volunteer, I mean, they have some time restrictions, right? You can't put like a staff responsibility on them, which also can lead jeopardize the program as well. So for that organization that's right there trying to figure out like what's the next move, what would you recommend?
I recommend that if it is a department of one trying to run everything, and that's true of a lot of organizations and a lot of people in that growth phase, that a lot of times many, general nonprofit consultants that don't really have knowledge about how volunteer engagement really works and plugs into capacity building will say, oh, the second person you hire part-time is your development director to chase money. No, the second person you hire is, if you're in that growth phase, is 20, 25 hours a week, a volunteer coordinator. And if you get someone who is, there's a pretty good pool right now of CVAs and people who've been in careers a long time who maybe want to retire from, again, like Gen X, kind of hitting that Gen X sweet spot of, and you could probably, maybe able to find a CVA or someone who, either family stuff or their own schedule, they do just want to work part-time. They need some flexibility, but they have the expertise. And if you can pay like somewhat decent amount, hopefully well above minimum wage, but if you can pay a somewhat decent amount for someone, even half-time or part-time, that's a great start. And then that helps build up not just the volunteer capacity, but again, a lot of volunteers also end up being donors, or they get their family to donate, or you can set up, matching stuff with corporate volunteers where the number of hours their employees volunteer in a big group project or are ongoing in different volunteer roles. Sometimes I've worked with, like Deloitte and Touche for a client, a Telegraph Hill neighborhood center years ago here in San Francisco. They had after school tutoring. So who better than a bunch of accountants and bankers to teach math to kids after school? So like an entire team could rotate through, or a volunteer might turn up once or twice a month, but there's a steady stream from a corporate team instead of just coming to paint a house or repaint a building or do something that does feel more like busy work. And that's where that kind of connection comes in of like, are you doing the work that is most important and impactful with your volunteers? Or too many nonprofits fall into this trap of we're creating busy work for donors or corporations that don't really move the needle on whatever we're trying to do. We're just kind of putting on a dog and pony show. We're like, oh, hey, everybody, let's put on a show.
Yeah.
But, that hurts us in the short term and the long term. You think, oh, we just got, a $5,000 grant because we hosted a corporate group. It's like, well, but did they really feel like they connected with the mission and the team? Did they connect with each other as a team? Like, was it just corporate team building that you got paid to host? Or was it something that genuinely helped people, in the community and is working with the community and not just kind of coming in and, being the savior or just, dropping in for a moment and feeling good about themselves and then going and like charging extra bank fees to that same community, the next day. And so I think there's that ethical balance. But I'd say, the second person you hire, and if they're a volunteer, if you can only afford volunteers, get a team together, make it a committee, make it a volunteer engagement committee or group where maybe there's 3 or 4 people that split a 40-hour-a-week task, but it's really clear how they're splitting their tasks and that they are a team that has enough knowledge to handle, any one of them can handle an email inquiry or phone call coming in and have the same answer. So it doesn't really matter how many people are in the role or if they're paid or unpaid, as long as you can find people with, some experience, some expertise. Doesn't have to be CVA, but hey, there's a lot of us out there, and someone, I do a certain amount of pro bono work every year. And so, can you get someone where they're really putting 5 or 10 hours a week or a month into helping to build out a strategic volunteer engagement plan? And no one has to invent anything from scratch. There's tons of models, there's templates, there's, my systems to use, there's Beth Steinhorn systems to use, there's Toby Johnson systems to use, there's, a lot of other, consultants. There's free stuff on now Idealist that combined with Volunteer Match last year. There's a lot of free resources and templates and how to set things up on Alive, volunteeralive.org. So if you're a member like I am, that's great. You get access to a ton of other member benefits, but someone who isn't a member can literally just go onto the Alive website and see, oh, these are some resources that I can utilize as templates to, whether it's a handbook or program design or what have you, to really build out the basics of my program and not sit there and look at a blank piece of paper like a terrified writer. Like,
Mm-hmm.
how do I do this? Like, it's easy to get that overwhelmed, but you either split the work a bunch with, half a dozen people for a full-time job of volunteers, or hire a part-time paid volunteer coordinator or manager who then can also, dub other volunteers, like, okay, great, you lead the recruitment project for me, you lead outreach for me, you do this, and kind of tap that into a combination of paid staff and volunteers doing that community connection and that really crucial work of building relationships and getting to, what's your target audience? Who are the people that you think are most interested in being volunteers? What array of people can do the thing that you're asking people to do? And that takes, some marketing savvy, as
Mm-hmm.
you know, as well. And so maybe but in addition to that coordinator, you can get someone who is a student in communications or marketing, or again, a professional from a corporate group that you might be aligned with or hoping to get grants from, that can come in and give those high level skills pro bono. A great resource for that is Taproot, if you haven't talked about that before, of getting kind of high level pro bono, database design, IT stuff, data analysis. There's a lot of ways that you can utilize talent in the community. It's just a matter of communicating it and then having a good experience when someone is being onboarded, that they understand that, okay, I'm not joining a sinking ship or a chaos crew or a whirlwind or a tornado. This is small, but it's steady and everybody cares and we're working together and we respect each other's ideas, and it's, whatever's the best idea to do it isn't attached to ego. It's like, great, that's the best way for that to work. Let's get to it.
I love that. And all of those resources you shared. Look, no one has an excuse as to why one person should be managing everything, because you just shared a lot of ways to be able to have others involved in managing the volunteer program until you're able to kind of make that higher, or doing a hybrid model. So I really appreciate that, along with all the resources to be able to, between Taproot, Alive, and all those other
Idealist, yeah, all these others, yeah.
idealists to
Mm-hmm.
go and check out. So I love that. Something you talked about was communication.
Mm-hmm.
And that's something I like to talk about a little bit more, because that's a very good point. Because oftentimes within our organizations, part of the reasons we're unable to bring additional volunteers, because we don't even have our needs listed or whichever. So then we just have volunteers coming and making up projects each or something for them every time. So let's
Yeah.
talk about that communication and being able to communicate opportunities, or taking the time to identify what the opportunities are across departments and so forth.
Well, hopefully, if someone's in a growth stage or they're starting a nonprofit, or sometimes that we're seeing a lot in the last few years, nonprofits are merging together. They don't want to fire everybody, but they're kind of reorganizing and figuring out how it's going to work. You want to do a genuine needs assessments of the role. So a lot of times, as a consultant, I'll come in, and I work a lot, and my background is heavy in conservation, and that's not exclusively how I work, but I tend to work with zoos and aquariums and museums and open space districts and land trusts and things like that.
Mhm.
But you want to have a needs assessment of what are the volunteer roles. Uh, are they realistic? Should it be a volunteer or a staff role? So again, we just talked about what's the balance of work of one. What are you asking one person or one role to do? Can many people? Ideally, volunteer roles are designed kind of the opposite of HR, or the inverse of HR, where you want as many people as possible to be able to come through that role for any amount of time and be successful. Plus, that role might be elevated by who's doing it and their own personal knowledge and their background. But it does take pre-production. It does take planning. And so I come in, and there's very often, sometimes fairly successful big or medium-sized organizations have been just kind of ad hoc and just adding in volunteer stuff kind of as it comes up. And maybe they're hiring me to help hire a volunteer manager or coordinator, or to take a look at the program and like, well, this isn't really working anymore. And Sometimes there's a role that was great in the 1970s or 80s, and it just really isn't necessary today, either because of technology or just because of how we've changed as a society, or the needs of the community have changed. And sometimes you want to take, a really honest look at what needs to be done. Is that a staff thing? Is that a part-time volunteer thing? And then create really a communication. It doesn't have to be complicated. It can be a one page or a few pages, but just enough of an editorial or production timeline, communication timeline of, well, these are the times of year that we need gala volunteers. Let's start that at least 3 months ahead of when we really need people, and not just rely on, pulling in staff members that, we're illegally not paying after hours to make it happen because we didn't have someone to coordinate enough volunteers to make this event happen. So it does take planning, and it does take structure. But again, all those templates and models of success are out there, but just kind of, well, what are we going to do with this corporate group? We want to take their money, but we don't have anything for them to do. Be honest with that corporate group. Say, we don't have something for you now. This is what we have. And don't push your own capacity to host volunteers, especially as a corporate group, but also as individuals. Like, don't bring on somebody that you don't know what they're going to do or how they're going to do it. And you can easily, design programs and then adjust as you need to, but, have a written out volunteer handbook, have a written out employee or staff, or just everybody, volunteers and staff. This is your code of conduct. These are the basic regulations we follow. This is our communication plan. And then having that solid infrastructure is absolutely essential to success. Because if you bring people into quicksand and they sink and they're like, I don't want to be in quicksand anymore, you've done that to yourself. But getting that communication out, and I call it, again, like an elevator pitch, where you train someone to say, there's like a 3-word phrase for volunteer recruitment, like join our team, cuddle baby penguins, help serve food. Like, it could just be a 3 to 5 word simple, like Nike, just do it. It can be a simple call to action. And then what's a 30-second elevator pitch where you can say, oh, well, I volunteer as a docent at the local zoo, and I do kid tours twice a month, but there's other things you can do as well. And here's who you get in contact with to talk about it. So if you have cards or something that can, physical cards these days, take a picture with your phone or scan it phone to phone, then that's really going to be the most effective way, is kind of training anyone and everyone in your organization to have consistent messaging about the organization. And then you've got a whole bunch of awesome free ambassadors who are already deeply rooted in the community that you're working with. And then stop and have those conversations once or twice a year, especially when things feel chaotic or scary or uncertain, and have, remotely or whatever, you can be, hey, we're planning a Zoom next week. I know it's short notice, but hop on the call, and here's how we're learning how to defend our constitutional rights in this country. Here's, there can be additional messaging that applies to each specific situation. And whether that's good or bad or scary or happy, it could be that, hey, we just got invited to the governor's gala to represent, we get a table at the governor's gala and we get to speak about our organization. Here's who we think would be great at that if we're really small, and it's not just, one, it might be the executive director, but bring up the volunteer coordinator, bring up the director of development, bring up a volunteer who may be doing a bunch of stuff, and have, just making sure that what you're communicating out to the world is going to be as consistent a possible experience when they actually get there and work with you. So setting and meeting expectations, or setting and exceeding expectations of everyone you're working with, whether that's volunteers, community members who may be on the outer orbit and might be interested in being a donor or volunteer, you don't know. There's always those opportunities to have that communication. And I think training everybody on up to a 3-minute conversation of the basics of the agency. You have to be this many years old as a minimum. You can bring kids that are 14 with parents, like whatever any other little regulatory legality things are. You have to have a driver's license. You need to get a CPR certification, whatever. If there's any hoops to jump through, be very honest about what that process is up front. And then people can self-select, and they can say, oh, I have no interest in learning CPR and doing this complicated role, but you know what? I can drop in once or twice a year and I can cater waiter at your events, and that's my volunteer support, and that's fantastic because that still helps. So not saying like, oh, the people who did 100 hours are better than the person who did 1 hour. We don't want to get into any kind of weird competition or we're better than them because we're here more. It's just like, no, everybody contributes in their own way, in the way they can, and we accept it, and we are grateful for it, and we do our best to support all of our team members, including volunteers. But the other side of that is making sure that if someone's causing a problem, that they don't stick around just because they're a donor or a longtime volunteer. Like you gotta, if something is toxic, there's a bad apple in the barrel, whatever idiom you want to use, there has to be accountability and fairness balancing that belonging and welcoming. So again, if you have a lot of goats and sheep and chickens and bunnies and cats and dogs, that a wolf or a mountain lion isn't invited in to just have at it and cause a lot of harm. I mixed so many metaphors in that long answer.
And I understood it.
Metaphor
Thank you.
salad, simile salad,
Right? I love it. Thank you. Thank you. Anything we didn't cover that you want to make sure that you share?
I think a great resource for everybody right now is the National Council of Nonprofits. They have a lot of free webinars on what to do in chaotic times. They have a lot of free webinars. They're keeping up really, really well with what is legislation and what does this mean? What is a pending policy that's not certain yet, so we don't need to respond yet, but just, connect with them on LinkedIn, go to their website, hop on one of their many free informational webinars. And it's not just about, rapid response right now, but they also have really great webinars that I've enjoyed on just policies and practices, like how do you do insurance? How do you do workers' comp? How do you engage better with donors? So National Council on Nonprofits, highly, highly recommend them as a resource as well.
Thank you. So where can people learn more about you and continue to follow your work?
You can find me on LinkedIn, Dana Litwin, Dana Corey Litwin, CVA. Very easy to cyberstalk these days, very easy to find. My YouTube channel, again, Dana's Priceless Advice for Leaders of Volunteers. And you can go to my website, danalitwinconsulting.com. But pretty much I'm pretty sure if you put in Dana Litwin CVA into your database, it's going to pop up with something related to me on some sort of platform or another. I'm not on Twitter. I'm a little bit on Facebook, and I'm on Blue Sky, and I'm on LinkedIn. So LinkedIn's probably the best place to have a conversation, make a connection, and then, hey, maybe they're a guest on my channel. Maybe they end up being a guest on your channel, other friends' podcasts and streams and channels. But yeah, I'm happy to get in touch with new people and peers and colleagues all the time.
Well, thank you so much, Dana, for coming on. It's always a great conversation with you. So I truly appreciate you coming on today.
Thank you so much, Lashina, for having me back. Always a joy to talk with you. And again, I'm very easy to find. If anyone's got follow-up questions, find me, message me, email me. I'm happy to continue the conversation.
Love it. All right. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. And we'll see you next time on Nonprofit Enthusiast Live. Bye, everyone.